A very good evening, everybody. Uh, Hi, my name is Dr. Gaurang Raval, and I am a member of the Emerging Trends Committee of Asian Oceanian Society of Radiology. Today, I welcome you all to Green Radiology, that is the second webinar in the sustainability webinar series of AOSR. This webinar has been a great effort by Asian Oceanian Society of Radiology in going towards a sustainable future. I would really like to thank Dr. Chamari and Dr. Evelyn, who have helped me a lot in getting these wonderful speakers and organizing the webinar. So without much ado, I would like to invite Dr. Chamari, who is the AOSR current president, to share her views on on today's webinar.
Thank you, Garang. Good day, colleagues and friends across Asia and around the world. On behalf of the Asian Oceanian Society of Radiology, it's my pleasure to welcome you to our first online webinar of the year. Today's session is made possible through the collaboration of the AOSR Sustainability Working Group, the Emerging Trends Committee, and AsiaSafe, reflecting our united commitment to sustainability in radiology. Our program, Green Radiology More Than Meets the Eye, brings together global perspective from multiple regions. I would like to express my sincere appreciation to our distinguished speakers, Mr. Nimitt Karia from United Kingdom, Dr. Florence from United States, and Dr. Charbel Saade from Ireland, as well as our moderator, Dr. Gaurang Raval from India. We are grateful to have such diverse international viewpoint represented here today. And I would also like to acknowledge Emeritus Professor Ng from AsiaSafe for his leadership and continued guidance. Thank you all for joining, and I wish you an inspiring and thought-provoking session. Thank you, Garang.
Thank you, ma'am. We also have Emeritus Professor Kwan Ng, who is the AsiaSafe chair. I would request to play his video of
Good evening, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Professor Ng, the chair of AsiaSafe. And on behalf of AsiaSafe, I'd like to welcome you to this webinar, Green Radiology More Than Meets the Eye, jointly organized by AOSR Sustainability Working Group, the Emerging Trends Committee, and AsiaSafe. And we are very much encouraged by so many of you attending today, which indicates a growing recognition that safety in radiology must now be understood in a broader and more integrated way. Now, traditionally, safety has been focusing on radiation protection, patient safety, professional standards, but this remain foundational, important. However, in our time, safety also encompasses social economic aspect, environmental responsibility, and sustainability, because our health systems, as well as the planetary health, are all interconnected. So in this wider perspective, sustainability is not peripheral to safety. It is essential component of it. And green radiology calls us to exercise responsible stewardship of the technology and resources, preserving the resources for the future generation to come, such as the limited supply of rare earths for contrast media, and also safeguard the environment, limited resources, and that is also intergenerational justice to ensure the well-being of the future generation. So let's hope that you will benefit from today's webinar. We deepen awareness, we stimulate professional dialogue, and encouraging concrete action across our radiology communities. And I wish you a fruitful, enlightening webinar. And thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Ang, for such wonderful views. And before we begin, I have a request for all the delegates and the attendees who have joined us across the globe. I would request you to please sign in into our platform and open the chat box. If you have any questions for the speakers, you can post those questions there. If we have any feedback forms or anything to share with you, we will post on the chat box. Also, this lecture will be available for viewing on the platform for the next 2 weeks if you have signed in today's session, or if you have signed in up for the program on Vidocto. And after 2 weeks it will be available on YouTube for the posterity. So without much ado, let's start with our program today. We are really happy to have our first speaker with us, Dr. Charbel Saade. He has graduated from the University of Sydney in radiography and masters in CT and MRI and a PhD in contrast media delivery. Charbel is currently working as an adjunct professor of medical imaging sciences at the University of College in Cork, Ireland, American University of Beirut, Lebanon, and University of Canberra, Australia. Charbel has a strong clinical background in the field of X-ray, CT, and MR. He is the owner and convener of mdct.com.au and has been teaching radiographers and radiologists for more than 20 years with latest tips and tricks to reduce contrast media administration and radiation dose whilst maintaining image quality in CT and MRI. Charbel is heavily supported by industry as an independent medical imaging expert who believes the truth lies in the patient by delivering quality imaging first time and every time. Welcome, Charbel. I would request you to share your.
Thank you very much, Dr. Raval, and thank you so much to the AOSR for inviting me to present today on Planet and People, the sustainability of rare earth elements of human use. So my journey has begun more than 25 years ago, where we developed significant contrast media reduction. And our first purpose was against, reducing patient risk and rates of reactions, and without all the extra contrast. But today we've evolved into, the intergenerational, as said perfectly by Professor Ng. So these are my disclosures, but my biggest disclosure is I'm going to say the truth, no matter the consequences, and we're all in this together forever. So let's first start off with, just some objectives. We're going to look at the evaluation of earth extraction. It's not just about gadolinium, it's bigger than gadolinium, and you'll be surprised once I show you exactly what resources on earth we're using just to extract gadolinium and how it transfers to the patient. We all know about depositation diseases. We look at environmental risks and supply. Gadolinium no longer is about retention in the brain. It's now ending up in our food and water. And of course, we look at the next generation of gadolinium, and we look at non-gadolinium alternatives, which is really interesting in the world. And then the impact of artificial intelligence. Now, this word is thrown around a lot in our industry. It is a fantastic, and it's a great time to be in it. However, there are risks with all new technology, and we'll just quickly touch on that as well. So if I look at gadolinium, for every 1 ton of gadolinium, I need to move 3,500 tons of earth. I need to use about 400 gigajoules. But more importantly, I need 7.1 million liters of water. And all of this is really impacting our environment. The little vial that you get, there's millions of liters of water and energy and earth moved up and out of the ground, and we're disrupting this ecosystem. And if I look at this, we look at what's the impact of how much do we get out of refined gadolinium before it starts going to the factories in the pharmaceutical world. You've got waste rock. So after we've pulled out about 3.5 tons, 3.4 tons, what do we do with it? It's all crushed. We've ruined the ecosystem. All of these insects and bugs that live in it, we've killed it. Where do we put it? Where do we go back? Then, of course, there is, rare earth oxides. There's a lot of rare earth elements that are ending up in gadolinium, especially in the generic gadolinium world that not a lot of people are talking about. And we're going to touch on that. And then, of course, when we look at rare earth elements, you're talking about cerium, lithium, neodymium, and so much more. Now, the amount of energy and water you need to remove these rare earth elements depends on the purity of your gadolinium that you're using. And then, of course, when we come to look at the separation of these really toxic rare earth elements, you need solvents. So that's why it costs even more money, more electricity, which is more greenhouse gases, more coal, more gas, more solar panels needed, while you've still disrupted the earth. So it's quite significant, the actual toll or impact on the earth. And then from the energy, about 420 gigajoules is about, you can power a 4-bedroom home. If I put it in the scheme of things, for about 3 to 4 years. That's just for 1 ton of gadolinium. We're using about 20 tons in the US and about 50 to 60 tons worldwide per year. So there is a lot of energy use. And what's even happening further is there's more MRI machines being installed. There's more free licenses given. There's more private institutions opening up. So all of this is rapidly expanding with technological advances. And this is the impact we're having on Earth. So if I look at this timeline, 7 million liters of water, and 70% of this water is used to mine at the site when they're pulling everything out of the ground. So most of it is actually at the source. And if you look at when you're refining the product to remove those rare earth elements, it's about 1.5 million liters of water. By the time it gets to our factories, we're using 125,000 liters. But these are still very large volumes of water and energy that's required. So let's quickly jump on deposit disease. Now, there is a lot of sometimes mismatch in how we understand between what is retention versus what is deposit. So retention is literally based on your kidney function, how long it lasts in your body and how fast your body can get it out. Now, deposit means it's based on kidney function and the molecule design. So there's still a lot of countries around the world still using linear contrast agents. Even liver-specific agents are linear agents. So that is then we need to consider deposit versus retention. Now, retention can also happen in normal versus abnormal renal function, and of course, due to the patient's hydration status. Now, primarily macrocyclic agents are considered class 2 according to the FDA and the American College of Radiology guidelines. However, even in patients with normal kidney function and using macrocyclic agents, we're still seeing deposit, but it's actually at a very small level. But deposit, we're going to touch on that in terms of the mechanism. A lot of us think of deposit is happening in the dentate nucleus, but that's only about 5% of deposit that's actually occurring. The real deposit is actually happening in the bones. Now, on T1 and T2 weighted sequences, red marrow is always going to be hyperintense, so you can't see the gadolinium. They only worked this out after they did a large cadaver study. And of course, we have the NSF, and unfortunately in radiology, we're almost like a supermarket. You come in, you get your scan, and then you leave. And our follow-up is not as much as you would with, family medicine or your nephrologist and so forth within, the medical hierarchy. And, when we're looking at, deposit of disease, we actually found this out where we looked at it and we found that it was passing through the lymphatic system. And this is where it's getting stuck and it was quite visible and it was seen, but also we're getting into the skin. We're actually seeing it in the eyes. It's happening quite a lot. And then, of course, if we look at stability factors, we know that if you use a linear contrast agent, you're 10 times more chances of the gadolinium being broken off and deposited in your body. Now, again, linear agents, once injected, they will released through transmetallation after 5 seconds, or between 5 to 7 seconds. If you look at macrocyclic agents, some are 43 hours, some are 4 days. And then, of course, with the new generation, we're looking at 20 days and so forth. So there's quite a bit of advancement, and we're going to touch on that quickly. And of course, symptoms. Still today, we don't have a clear evidence of does gadolinium deposits are causing any clinical symptoms. However, some people are experiencing cognitive fog, neuropathy, chronic pain, and so forth, but this is after certain amounts of injections. Now, there's been a lot of rat studies being performed with large volumes of gadolinium given in a short period of time, which is above the human doses, and we've seen neural loss and demyelination of the myelin sheath. So there's quite a lot that's happening out there when you look at toxicology. And of course, we touched on this quickly based on renal function. The risk is low when you have a normal eGFR, but that still there is a risk because you think it's macrocyclic, it's safe, it's not, because in terms of using safe, no product that's ever injected into the human body is considered as safe. Of course, if you have moderate impairment and eGFR between 30 to 60, you will have increased retention and delayed excretion. This is where hydration therapy is one of the greatest forms to actually help this process through to reduce the amount of retention. And of course, with severe impairment less than 30, NSF, and with the new agents, there's a lot of great literature that's coming out as well. And so what I did was I had a look at this paper that was actually published in chemistry. And what they did was they looked at the rare earth elements between the innovator agents versus the generic agents. And for example, if you look at these rare earth elements, okay, the reason why generic agents are cheaper is because the processing within the actual plant in terms of using the solvents to remove those extra rare earth elements, they're not doing that. So that's why one needs to be careful based on when you're looking at the chemistry profile of your contrast agents between real and versus generics. It might be cheaper, but there is a shortcut somewhere for sure. Now, the molecule is exactly the same, but it's everything else around it, you know, these rare earth elements which are potentially impacting patients. Now, if we look at also the comparison in terms of deposits, we know that 50 to 80% of gadolinium is stored in the skeletal system. Not a lot of people know that. Also, in patients that have linear agents, 100% is getting into the dentate nucleus. We know because this is the excretion pathway through the lymphatic system. When we look at the globus pallidus, now this is the secondary site of deposits that's happening. And this is quite interesting and also within the spinal cord. Of course, we know about soft tissue. There's about 7% chance if an eGFR is less than 30. And of course, general body retention. Now, if I look at current contrast media agents in gadolinium, the new phase 2 trials has actually shown as manganese-based agents. We're going to talk about that. There's less than 0.1% because the body can metabolize it. Our bodies are not able to metabolize gadolinium. And this is the beauty of a sustainable future that gadolinium and radiology is going to. So there's a lot of very new information coming out, and we're watching this market slowly. But what is the real impact for us today? For us in radiology today, our patients are coming back to us for multiple examinations over short periods of time. So if we have a look here, any patient over 5 years, if they're having breast cancer and they need to have neoadjuvant chemotherapy or, you know, pre-surgery, post-surgery, surveillance scans, you're looking at anywhere between 4 to about 15 injections within 5 years. Now, if you have high volumes within these 5 years at multiple times, the level of retention is going to be higher, because I'm going to go and show you at normal kidney function how long retention is. So we need to be more considerate to even our cancer patients, because the more they use it, the more they're getting injected, the larger volumes, the greater the concentrations, the more it ends up in our waterways, then it more ends up into our food. So it's getting into plants, and I'm going to touch on that as well. So if we look at next generation agents, so The FDA has approved gadopicolol, which is a large macrocyclic agent. It's, fantastic relaxivity. And there's another one about to come to the market called gadoquatrain. It's not approved yet, but these agents are really high relaxivity. And what it means is you're able to use less gadolinium based on the concentration. So with, for example, gadopicolol, you're looking at a 50% reduction of the gadolinium ion in the molecule. However, you're getting 4 to 5 times more relaxivity than any other agent on the market. So this is really good. So that means instead of using 60 tons a year of gadolinium, now we can use 30 tons if the whole world uses gadopicolol. And of course, gadoquatrain is a tetrametric macrocyclic agent. Okay, it shows up to 60% reduction with a 0.4 millimoles per kilo, and of course with a non-inferior enhancement profile. So now we also know with these new agents, they have double the kinetic stability. They're quite stronger compared to current macrocyclics. So it's going to have more or less impact in retention. So if it stays longer in the body, it's not going to break up, which is a really good thing for the patient. And by using half the gadolinium, it's even better. So we can do more patients using less resources on Earth. And if we now look at the dethroning of gadolinium, now this is interesting. We've got ferromoxetol, which is a supermagnetic iron oxide nanoparticle. This is really nice for metabolic pathways, and it's really good for T1 post-contrast imaging. And it's currently used now in patients with renal failure, and they're using it for MRAs. But what is interesting, in the next 5 years, we're going to see this manganese-based contrast agent come to the market. Now, this is a natural trace element that mimics the paramagnetic properties of gadolinium, but our body biologically recognizes it. We can break it down and it won't have retention or deposits in our body. This is the beauty of going down this pathway. And more importantly, they found out that 100% clearance is achieved within 24 hours with 0.1% retention. All the other agents, when we're looking at retention, 24 hours, you only got about 90 to 95%. That's been eliminated. 5% is still in retention at normal kidney function. Now, the ultimate goal in all of this, when you want to dethrone gadolinium and go into a body-specific and human-specific agent, the transition of iron and manganese aims to eliminate heavy metal retention entirely in our bodies. This is where green radiology starts, because now our body recognizes it and we can break it down like we do for iodine in CT by replacing rare earth metals with abundant and biodegradable alternatives. So now our gadolinium concentration in our waterways will only get more and more and more the more we use. But if we use manganese, it's biodegradable. It goes into our waterways and then it goes back into natural existence within the earth. And it doesn't affect our water. So we're not going to need gadolinium-free water in the future. It's not going to affect our plants and so forth. Now, if we're looking also at relaxivity with gadopicolol, it's about 12 to 13 compared to gadobuterol, which is the current one on the market. Gadopicolol is the new one, which has been out for 2 years. It's almost double to 3 times more. Manganese is going to be about 8 to 9 millimoles for relaxivity, which is quite good compared to what we're using now with, gadobuterol. And of course, iron-based. Now, these will come back and they have fantastic metabolic pathways. They're about 15 to 25. Now, these are very, very high in their relaxivity. But again, with iron, it really depends, of course, on the manufacturing cost and the energies and so forth. Environmental impacts. So we know 100% of gadolinium excreted is ending up in our waterways. But we're also seeing now it's a micropollutant, and we're actually now starting to see this increasing significantly 10,000 times as the background, natural background levels by 10,000 times. And now we're getting re-exposed to gadolinium through drinking water. Now we know less than 1% of gadolinium can be digested orally, but we still don't know the full impacts yet. And also 80% of tap water samples tested in major cities in the US have actually found gadolinium. So, and this is not naturally occurring in the environment. You have to dig it out. And also what we've also found is it's now caused physiological stress. Now, what's happening is now 30 to 50% of the algae that sits on the Earth's water surface in the sea, which is the actual lungs of the Earth, like the trees are, they've been disrupted by 50%. And the fish, gadolinium, is now interfering with the calcium channels, which is disrupting inner regulation, and we're getting compromised skeletal development. We're starting to see this in the fish. And what this does then is once it goes into our ecosystem, it goes into the sewage sludge as a fertilizer. That fertilizer is then used in farms, and now it's ending up in our plants, and it's reducing our crop yield. Now, we already have a heating environment, a heating earth. We're getting drier, less water everywhere. But now it's reducing our crop yields. So gadolinium is actually affecting how much we can regrow our crops and plants. And then, of course, the biodiversity to the wetlands is significantly increasing as well within concentration over time. And this is causing what they call is oxidative stress in macroinvertebrates and amphibians, leading to population decline and extinction. So we are in trouble. The more gadolinium we use, the more we're impacting the Earth's environment. And then now I want to touch on AI. Now, everyone talks about AI. Wow, fantastic. We can do 90% reduction of gadolinium use, which is fantastic. So if I take a look at example, this is 4 mils of GAD on a normal patient, quarter dose. When we use 16 mils at full dose, now we're talking about a 0.5 concentration, you can actually see quite nicely the lesion enhancement pattern in terms of the peripheral, if I show you right here, the intermediate zone, which is heterogeneous, and you can see the core quite nicely. Now, when you used AI image reconstruction, we actually can see greater wall enhancement using less gadolinium, and you can see 5 to 6 times more relaxivity and more information. So there's a lot that we haven't seen before. Now we can see better. And here is another example as well when you're using deeper learning and using 10% of the dose. So this is beautiful. We've gone from 100% down to 10%. The new agents are about 50% reduction. With AI, it's going to get down to 10%. And this is great. But as you can see here with this lesion, you can see it nicely there with the standard dose at 0.1 millimole, as almost as a double dose if a 0.5 or a single for a gadobuterol. Then if I look at 10% dose on a normal patient without any iterative reconstruction, deep learning or AI, once AI is involved, you can actually see the enhancement pattern nicely. Now, this is all good and said, but we do have problems. The false positives and the false negatives in low dose MR becomes a problem because motion artifact might be mistaken for a lesion, and we're actually seeing this as a ghosting artifact. Also, over smoothing, or what we call is hallucination in AI models. So, for example, depending on which model it's trained for which disease, patterns might be actually making the border well-defined when actually it's not well-defined, it's speculated. So this could affect us in breast MR potentially in the future. If I look at signal thresholding, 10% dose doesn't necessarily mean it's going to enhance all lesions of all sizes exactly the same. So this is where, for example, if I look at MS imaging, small maybe lesions which are dormant, but they're not enhancing, could show up as the enhancement. And of course, you get a lot of averaging. But this is the key. If I want to take away everything, just at the bottom of the screen here, you're going to see sensitivity for large tumors are excellent, nearly at 100% when you're using 10% GAD with AI. But the false negative is so high when you get to 3 to 5 millimeters. So we're still far off in terms of using gadolinium appropriately for size and lesions within the brain. Now, I've only just talked about the brain here. And then also sometimes you start to get, the AI and deep learning starts to make all of these extra false lesions when you compare it to the gold standard, which is gadolinium at full dose. You start to see all of these extra lesions come up unnecessarily. So sometimes we're going to see things that are really not there. So that's why the ground truth, we're still far from it. but it's all works in progress worldwide. And I'm using all recent data and information. So if I finish this presentation, and this is my personal view as Charbel, where do we balance risk and reward? The ethical dilemma of diagnostic necessity versus toxicological risk. It's not about the patient as a risk on its own, it's also about our environment. The importance of informed consent is really important, and the type of contrast you're using is even more important. And the role of radiologists with radiographers, reducing your contrast volume is the greatest form of reducing impact to your patient and your environment. And of course, going into newer technologies and newer agents if possible. And what's more importantly, if you do have AI, this is fantastic, but be aware on large lesions, it's great. On small lesions, be careful. You're going to see things that are not naturally there. So you need to always go back and look at the ground or golden truth. And of course, waste management. This is something companies are starting to do, but again, we're still way off on this. And of course, moving to, I remember my former boss, she once told me, Charbel, MRI is always 20 times better than CT without GAD. Adding gadolinium, how much more does it add to the outcome of your patient? So sometimes asking that question, is it going to be a clinical impact when you can see it there? And of course, the balance and safety profiles. Make sure your patients have good eGFRs. If not, make sure you get them on hydration therapy, which is under the European guidelines, which
I
show
would
them really, really
request
well.
Dr. Charbel to wrap up the talk, please, if possible.
Yeah. And the last line, of course, enhanced accuracy doesn't come at the cost of the patient or the environment. So thank you all very much. And I pass the floor back to Dr. Raval and to our great speakers coming up. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Charbel, for such a detailed talk. It was really enlightening for us and maybe eye-opening what the future holds. I would like to now invite Dr. Florence Du. She's an abdominal radiologist. She's an abdominal radiologist and director of innovation at UME and University of Maryland Institute for Health Computing, faculty member leading the AI-enabled medical imaging team. Her research program focuses on translating technologies to improve clinical patient care with a focus on safe and trustworthy sustainable applications of AI and informatics tool. Over to you, ma'am.
Okay, great. Thank you for that introduction. So I'm going to shorten my talk a little bit, so please wave at me if I am going to go over. So our topic today is artificial intelligence. Here are my disclosures, and I'm not going to read them to you, but just wanting to note that if I mention an item, it's for educational purposes only, and opinions are my own. So very briefly, what is planetary health, and why does that matter to radiology?
Sorry to disturb
So,
you. Share your
yes,
slide, please. Not able to see your
sorry,
screen.
let me reshare.
I can see it clearly.
Yeah, now.
Can you see it now? Okay,
Okay,
Yes.
now, yes.
great.
Good.
Sure. So what is planetary health and why does it impact radiology? So on the left side, you'll see that we have potential environmental impacts just in the practice of radiology, from energy to waste, and as you just heard, finite resources and environmental contamination. That drives greenhouse gases and climate change, which then impacts human health disparities, and our health systems overall. So really what I wanted to highlight here is that planetary health means that human health and the health of our planet are linked. In the US, healthcare contributes to nearly 10% of emissions, and imaging plays a significant role. So when we talk about this, it's really a healthcare delivery problem and an intergenerational problem, as someone else has mentioned. We want to think about the right patient, the right diagnosis, the right treatment for the right price. And at this nexus of planetary health, imaging care delivery, and artificial intelligence, there's that overlap that we want to discuss today. We want to do all of this care sustainably. There is an organization I just wanted to highlight briefly, is the Radiologists for a Sustainable Future. That's an international organization. Feel free to join and reach out if you'd like. And focusing in on this AI aspect, what is happening with radiology AI and why is this a sustainability topic at all? So my question to this audience, and I recognize now that I do not have an actual interactive method to coordinate with all of you, But just think at your seat. How many of you use AI in your personal life and then perhaps in your radiology practice? Right? Just think at your seat, answer that to yourself. And what do you think is how that impacts the sustainability of the climate and the world around you? Well, in my practice, I started using artificial intelligence in my residency at Mount Sinai West, and then in my fellowship, and now in my faculty position. And in the US, at least in 2020, how were the American College of Radiology members, ACR, using artificial intelligence? At that time, 33% of respondents were using AI as part of their practice, with 20% predicted to increase that use in the next 5 years. It is now obviously 2026, and it's true that the most recent 2023 data, so less than 5 years, 50% were using some form of AI in their practice. Why is that the case in the US at least? It turns out that 75% of FDA cleared tools are in the realm of radiology, so that would make a lot of sense as to why radiologists would be adopting it as well. And I think it's just something that we're feeling a lot of the pressures of increased volumes and just being interested in technology overall. We've always been the first to adopt PAC systems and needing CTs and MRIs. We're just really facile with technologies and wanting to do better for our patients. And I think artificial intelligence is really hitting on that nexus. So when we think about imaging and imaging AI at scale, we need to think about that informatics ecosystem, the compute, the cloud, all of the resources that are used in developing this at that scale. So now we're going to do an activity for whoever is online right now. There's a QR code here as well, just to think through this question. What is the most sustainable hospital in the Asian Oceanic region? I chose a website, Perplexity AI. You can use your favorite site and see what you get. I know that there's other options like Claude or ChatGPT or Gemini. Use your favorite. And if you don't want to type that, you just want to scan it on your phone. This is the same question already asked. Okay, I'm going to move on for the sake of time. You'll notice that this is the answer that you get. The leading sustainable hospitals in the Asian Oceanic region are listed here, with 1 in Malaysia and 3 in Singapore. And of course, this keeps going down the screen, but I just took the very top of the screenshot. So hopefully you see your hospital here, and if not, or your site, consider how you might increase your ranking, I guess, in these generative AI tools. So my follow-up activity is, how much energy and water did you use with that Perplexity AI query? I would like to say that when we take flights or if we do things like recycle locally, we can kind of understand the emissions that are associated with that. They kind of print that, at least on the flights that I've been taking, and you can also offset those emissions, but we don't have that option with AI. It's not printed, it's not very visible to us. So I would like to argue here to think about that further. And shameless plug, there's an article that we co-authored with a bunch of authors here. If you see a QR code, that means that the article should be available for you to open for your personal use. So just going over that very quickly, is that there's both negative impacts as well as positive impacts of artificial intelligence. We'll go over this left side very quickly to think about what the negative environmental impacts of AI might be. So let's go very quickly over AI model development and deployment. Here, when you're deploying your own AI tool on your local device, you can choose to develop your own large language model or even agentic workflow now. But if you wanted to try that out, there's a GitHub link within this article. You first have to choose your model type and your model size and consider what benchmarks it's performing on when you're selecting which one to load. What we did was we loaded chest radiographs, 3,665 of them, had them perform a task across 13 labels, and thought to ourselves, what if we chose 2 different types of models, Llama 2, Vicuna 1.5 back in 2023, and thought through the different sizes of these models? You would assume that the more parameters, so 70 billion has more different weights, it's able to think more deeply than a 7 billion model. I'm using think very loosely here, so computer scientists, please don't get mad at me. Then fine-tuned Vicuna 1.5, 13 billion or 7 billion. So 3 different sizes of Llama 2, 2 different sizes of Vicuna 1.5 to do 13 labels on a chest radiograph. And what we found is, if you look at these 2 models and you look at these sizes, that if you looked at the accuracy, the 70 billion looks obviously like it did much better than the 7 billion, 92.7% accuracy, better than 7.9. But what was really interesting is this fine-tuned Vicuna 1.5 model of 7 billion versus 13 billion parameters. It actually did better. And if you think about the GPU energy that's consumed in a kilowatt hour format, this is how much energy is used in that labeling task. So we developed a ratio of efficiency ratio to think about accuracy per kilowatt hour to see that the Vicuna 1.5 is just performing way better for the amount of energy it's using. So as one of my mentors has mentioned, don't use a sledgehammer for a nail, right? That every AI task is not the same AI task, and we can choose kind of lightweight models for certain tasks so that we don't kill our environment along the way. So future thinking is, will we instead be more efficient overall? Like, is my research even that important, right? So if you think about GPT-3 in 2020, it had 175 billion parameters and used 1,287 megawatts. And here, GLAM, a different model with TPUs, was much larger, had much lower energy consumption, and much lower emissions. So that's a possibility. And I really do hope this is one of those areas of research you want to go away, right? Like that if we could become super efficient, that's a great thing. And I do want this area of research to expand and get better. And if the next thing I want us to think about is, where is this type of training, model training, development, and inference happening? And one way to look at that is with the data centers. This is the data center map from datacentermap.com, just one of many ways you can go look at where these are located. And you can see the geographic distribution and some in the Asian Oceanic region. Importantly, where these are located and what is happening with AI is that there's a predicted massive increase, right, in how much energy is being used across all of these different types of data centers, from storage all the way to artificial intelligence use and even cryptocurrencies. This is from the IAEA. And also thinking about what type of energy sources those data centers may be using because of what's locally available and in a geopolitical fashion. So you can see here that the different sources of energy are very different from across the world, and specifically here in the US. And you can also go pick your country based off of this website here. And really important to think about is the cost to communities. So Microsoft has a plan to keep its data centers from raising your electric bill. This is from the US, January 13th, so just a few days ago. As they're betting on things like nuclear power, they're building these power plants right next to their data centers to try to power this AI revolution. And as we had just asked you, how much water are you using for that inference? If you thought about a 500 milliliter amount of water, if you can imagine that Arizona is very dry in the US, you would only get 15 inferences, 15 questions to the AI tool before you used up 500 milliliters of water. But something that may have a little bit more water locally, like Wyoming, you could do 40 questions to that same tool to use up 500 milliliters of water. So it's more efficiently using up water resources. And you can see that distribution across the world here. Importantly, global AI Scope 1 and 2 water withdrawal in 2027 is estimated to be 4 to 6 times the annual water withdrawal of Denmark. And so those are the negative impacts. And I do recognize that there's also positive impacts. So I'll just touch on that briefly in the last 2 minutes I have here. Really briefly here is AI for image acquisition and pre-processing. As you may know, PET-CT scans could take up to 24 minutes, and with artificial intelligence tools, you can minimize that down to 6 minutes, both an efficiency gain for the patient, but also for the planet. Here, the prior speaker had already talked on this contrast, waste, and contamination. We had published this article just describing the increase of use across the U.S., specifically in gadolinium and in iodine, which is a non-renewable resource. And specifically, you can see this dip in 2020 because of COVID, but there's an increasing trend across the years. This prior speaker already spoke about this, so I'm not going to touch on this too much, but you can use AI to reduce the dose of contrast, both for iodine and gadolinium. Another area to think about is inpatient and radiology workforce scheduling. With reducing these gaps across this workflow, this not only helps the radiologists and the efficiency of our scheduling patients, but also their transit time, right? So if somebody has to come in for one ultrasound and then has to come in again for an MRI a couple days later, saving that transit cost can universally reduce emissions from outside of just the normal Scope 1 or Scope 2 emissions for that visit. So I know that that was a little bit of a whirlwind for both negative and environmental impacts and positive ways to use AI. But hopefully, a couple last points to think about is, consider someday the sustainability benchmarks that we're using and reporting. So are we reporting it in abstracts, papers, public policy, transit, Zoom conferences, which are theoretically more environmentally friendly, but we don't also know that our impacts, as well as using radiology eco-labels, perhaps, labeling something like an Energy Star and Energy Guide, or even doing the LEED Council certifications to think about carbon-aware design, hardware life cycles, and being transparent overall. There is a label through the European Society of Radiology where they've voted on the Green ID department. And we have the American College of Radiology Committee on Sustainability that is considering adopting this Green ID so that we can have a more global metric for radiology practices. And this is the last thought that across the individual, the interpersonal community, society, and globally, that impacts planetary health. And we do know that there's biological determinants of health and sociocultural environment determinants of health. We haven't really talked about the digital environment and the digital determinants of health. I'm not going to read this slide to you. This article is available. Just wanted us to think about that we've covered a lot of topics, and there's many, many more topics to discuss with planetary health and the digital environment that touches on AI. So above all, I dare you to do good so that the world might be great. And please brainstorm more ideas and reach out to me. Let's collaborate on papers and projects. Thank you very much for listening and participating today.
Thank you so much for such a informative lecture. And moving on to our third speaker for today. Nimitt Karia. He has been a project and a program management consultant over the last 28 years and has a 17 years of teaching experience. His understanding of the built environment sector has broadened from buildings to infrastructures, cities to major programs with experience in extraordinarily fast-track projects in the UK, Africa, and India. He has undertaken a variety of projects, including mixed-use developments, institutions, hotels, airports, schools, townships, and 12 hospitals of various sizes ranging from 45 to 100 beds in 3 continents, many achieving highest environmental assessment certifications and awards. Over to you, Mr. Karia.
Thank you very much, Gaurang. If I can share my screen. Good morning, everyone. Yes, I moving on from the previous lecture from Dr. Florence, she talked about right patients, right diagnosis, right treatment, and right price, and why not right sustainability. And part of that is right buildings. So every one of you would have come across building a radiology department or a hospital, and I'm here to talk about that today. So as Gaurang has already introduced me, I have been working in project and program management in the built environment sector, and I have delivered quite a few hospitals. Started with a radiology department in the late 90s, and I've built large cancer hospitals and largest hospital in Asia in Surat and Ahmedabad, as well as in Angola, Africa. So this has been my journey, and what Dr. Charbel was talking about, that how we are contaminating the waterways through variety of nutrients. That is what I'm working on at the moment in program management, £1 billion worth of program for one of the 7 parts of UK where we are doing the nutrient removal program. I come from a very different world. I am not a doctor. I am looking at buildings and how that affects you guys who are working in the medical field. So what I want to talk about, we have already discussed, and you all know, so I'll briefly touch upon what sustainability means to me. What are the environmental assessment frameworks available in the market for a sustainable building, and what it means to you in terms of radiology, and how can you build such buildings with the design technology and management of that. And finally, I would conclude with a simple one-page aid memoir for all of you to take away and say that whenever you are involved in a building project, what you should be looking at. So basically, sustainability, you all know about this, that it's about fulfilling the current needs by without compromising the future generations' needs. And we should talk about environmental sustainability, but also economic viability as the core elements and the social responsibility. Now, what previous 2 speakers mentioned, and I have to emphasize here, is the healthcare buildings and equipment contribute about 4.4% of global greenhouse gas emissions due to energy-intensive operations. Now, this includes the building process of that. And maintenance and operations of the built environment where you are, wherever the department and the whole hospital is working in. So that is the statistics, and as we have already discussed, it can harm the environment. Sustainability practices can improve the patient outcome and the well-being of people working in it, and it definitely reduces cost. So I will run through that with a number of examples. What is happening across the world? That things like NHS is working towards a net zero commitment for 2040. So that's what is happening in the UK. And again, this slide is mainly emphasizing that the radiology's role in sustainability is that you must optimize energy use and reduce waste to support the goals which the world is looking for. And so what are the environmental assessment frameworks available for buildings? Dr. Florence touched upon it a little bit in terms of your work. But in buildings, these are well-known environmental assessment methods. LEED, which is an American method, BREEAM, which is a British method, and well building priorities is well standards are for human health, for air quality, water, lighting, thermal comfort, and mental well-being in the buildings. So whenever you are dealing with buildings, please consider these environmental assessment methods and insist on that to your partners who are from building industry, like architects and structural engineers and whoever you are dealing with. So what does it mean for a responsible radiology department design? This can be simple, that whatever radiology departments we have seen there, it's less light, you are always in the basements, and whenever you go and meet a radiographer or radiologist and say, what's the weather like outside? And this is worrying. This is, you all know that this is absolutely worrying. So efficient patient flow and designing spatial layout with enough lighting, natural lights and comfort. That's what we did in, you can see it in Zydus Hospital, Sims Hospital in India. We know about this, most people are aware of this, that the advanced HVAC systems, air conditioning systems and demand control ensures optimal air quality and pressure management. Every single time where I have been a patient and I go there, it is, you want high air conditioning in your radiology unit, and that's very, very discomforting for the patients. And this uses so much energy. That has been minimized a lot, and efficient demand control systems have been done in Kiran Hospital and Gujarat Cancer in Ahmedabad and Surat. Sustainable construction practice, low carbon materials. Now, what I mean by that is that you choose a material, for example, you say that, should I use wood or aluminum? Now, generally our reaction would be that, oh, for wood, we have to cut trees. Maybe not. You have to look at the embodied energies for how much mining of aluminum core and then manufacturing and then transporting cost. If you have a Forestry Stewardship Council certified trees available nearby from a nearby place, then it's better that way. We did that by using fly ash bricks instead of normal bricks in Sims Hospital. They were high quality, 65 kg per cm square instead of 35, and that's what we did in Asia and in Africa for many of the projects. And as I talked about the Forestry Stewardship Council, that's another thing which you need to be careful of whenever you're using any timber in your projects. I think the previous two speakers have talked about the technology and materials, energy efficient imaging, and the power save protocols. So that's already talked about by the previous two speakers. I have talked about the sustainable construction materials and primarily the embodied energy considerations. The last thing I want to talk about in that is building management systems, integration of all your equipments and real-time energy monitoring and optimization. Now, this is something which is normally by doctor clients is ignored, or they say they don't want to spend enough money on that. I think it is primary if that is done. And before we conclude towards the aid memoir for a radiologist, the last thing I would talk about is the life cycle costing and operational management consideration. So, comprehensive cost evaluation. Now, as a doctor, any doctor would say, when I'm building a hospital, I would go for spending my investment mainly for the equipment. I'll buy a better MRI machine or a CT scan machine. We had a project where, as I said, we were using fly ash bricks. Now, fly ash bricks in the city of Ahmedabad at that time, there were 2 suppliers, and we were getting about 2,000 bricks a day for the whole city. This particular project required 9,500 bricks per day for the program to achieve the fast track program we were doing. And I was able to convince the doctors to invest in 3 brick making machines. Now, for that, I had to show the NPV. I had to show there was a supply chain management where they could, at the end of the cycle, it was a buyback policy and all of that. And doctors did actually invest in that. So this was a comprehensive cost evaluation which you should demand from your project managers and from your people working in your building projects. There are enough guidelines, international certification and guidelines available. And the second thing I want to talk about is the whole life carbon assessment. For every material used in your building, whatever buildings you're doing, for all materials used, you should do whole life carbon assessment, including the material used, for example, anything you use during operations and maintenance. Now, in your operations, of course, the previous 2 speakers have talked about that you should do that. But I'm talking about whole life carbon assessment for that. These are primary things which one must consider. You have all the help. There are, as I said, environmental management systems, ISO certifications available, guidelines available for that. And for sustainable radiology practices, you all know that using clinical guidelines, there is a reference there I have put down. And for US and UK, there are very good guidelines available for that. And for the last stage of buildings, which is the commissioning stage and handover stage, the BISRIA guidelines for soft landing, that the maintenance team, operations team are able to work with the building team, and this reduces so much of energy use and problems later in life. So what are the tangible benefits and what as a radiologist you can do? As we talked about, there is cost reduction because of the reduced energy and reduction in water costs. There is patient comfort, of course, and I think the main thing is comfort of the people working, the radiologists, radiographers, and all the people working in the environment. There is healthier work conditions, and of course, with the LEED certification or BREEAM certification, you have the reputation. You can get that with the sustainability standards and the certification you achieve with your buildings. As we have discussed in previous 2 lectures, there is a long-term value in doing this. So for 4.4% of global carbon emission and energy carbon emission, you have responsibility for doing something in that. So as I said, have the key performance indicators early on in planning, very early in the building life cycle. Agree that with your architect friends and your project manager friends, and tell them that this is what we will be doing in terms of and benchmark it against other hospitals and other areas. as I said, you design flexible layouts and low carbon buildings with use of materials and energy efficient equipment and low energy consumption equipments. And the last thing is waste management and evaluate all of that with post-occupancy evaluation. So let me summarize and the final call of action. I'll keep it very simple that we have talked about the sustainability importance, what it supports clinical excellence, financial stability, environmental responsibility, and healthcare settings in the healthcare settings. And I've given you the framework which are available in the market, the LEED, BREEAM, WELL certification, life cycle costing, and carbon assessment. We talked about that. I know it is very brief in this presentation. This is an area which is related, but you can reach out to me anytime for anything you want to discuss when you are building any of your project. What I call for is, as doctors and radiologists, start with one single imaging suite to test the feasibility of what we have talked about, and then encourage wider sustainability adoption. You are doctors who are leaders in your work, so collaborate with the design and management teams. Hopefully this summarizes the building journey. Thank you very much. That's the contact, and hope that helps.
Thank you so much, Mr. Nimitt, for such an insightful views on building the sustainable radiology departments. And we still have time for a very short question and answer session. My first question would be to Charbel. I think he gave a very good presentation on the upcoming molecules which are really sustainable, especially the gadolinium. But just like a developing being a radiologist from a developing country like India, how the cost difference would play into these upcoming but sustainable molecules. What are your views on that? Cost effect.
Fantastic question. And of course, the way you use gadolinium normally, how we've always thought about it is 1 mil per kilo based on concentration. But now it's 1 mil per kilo at half the concentration. But when we discussed in terms of pricing, they're very similar to the current high relaxivity markets agents as they are now, or they'll be a little bit more higher. Only because now a lot of the pharmaceutical factories, they've started to use a lot of solar power and energy. So that helps reduce cost as well. But of course, when it comes to doing larger molecules with half the concentration to get more relaxivity, it involves more chemistry and processing, because to remove those rare earth elements, that's the key. Now, if I want to look at it in a sustainable way, you can do this quite easily between, for example, North America versus Central Asia, like India. Now, if I look at the size of the people, we compare the volumes. Of course, you're going to use a lot less in India because people generally are smaller towards the middle and the south of India, not in the north. In the Punjab region, they're a lot larger people. But overall, when you look at a dollar for dollar comparison, they're going to be very, very similar in actual fact, because the power of MR and gadolinium is the saline chaser that you're going to push. So you can always go less and less and less by using more and more saline, and that will give you a better result. So very similar in terms of pricing, if people want to look at that. The processing has cost a lot more money for factories. But if you look at the population and the size of these people, it's a lot easier to get smaller volumes and so forth. So it's a great question, but it's complicated to answer, but I hope I've simplified it enough.
Absolutely.
To
Absolutely.
show the future of radiology.
Very heartening and very encouraging to use the newer molecules and newer technology, especially in gadolinium. Absolutely. We also have a question from Professor Ng for Dr. Du. The increasing use of AI in healthcare has also increased the demand of data centers. So, what's the expected environmental impact? How will this affect the LMICS?
Sure. So I also typed out a little bit of a thing, so I don't know if that's also able to be shared. But one thing that I had touched on was that yes, absolutely I agree. Is if we as you use more AI, you may also increase your use of data centers. With the map that I had shown in the slides, one way to look at it is just to see where those data centers are in the local communities. Those things will by default use potable water sources from nearby. It'll be drawing electricity from the communities, sometimes increasing energy bills for local communities. So that's one direct area that will impact even radiology practices, right? When you build a center, you think about how much energy your MRI is using, your CT, and how much that's increasing the local community problems. But secondarily, I do want to highlight there's a geopolitical problem happening right now with the AI revolution is who has access to GPUs, who is allowed to buy them, even from NVIDIA, and how does that impact who has access to build and deploy tools in radiology, but also just generally the tool that you used, Perplexity, in this chat, right? And got to interact with. Are you able to build a local version of that to even suit the language and the culture? There's been actually research showing that AI tools actually respond to that kind of linguistic and cultural change because they're large language models. So, how does that impact your local population when healthcare is delivered to them and they want to translate the radiology report? I think all those things have to do with sustainable delivery of care because that impacts your efficiency and the way that artificial intelligence is able to impact care delivery. So I'm happy to talk about that in a whole different talk, but let's collaborate on papers and maybe publish more on that.
Sure. We have a question, I think two questions for Mr. Nimitt. One is from Dr. Chamari. Ma'am, please.
Oh, yes. Thank you. You have I have I have two questions. One is my hospital actually building on the lead platform, right? Lead Go. And we found out that actually it increased quite a bit of cost in terms of design as a lead Go. This is even not the lead operation yet, only lead building. So to try to make the sustainable building, it costs quite a bit. And we look into the lead platinum, right? It's also very difficult in certain countries because the criteria of using the material in the lead building for lead platinum, it's quite impossible in certain area. So that's one of my question to you, that how we're going to explain to our owner or the investor that okay, we need to compromise between the expense on the lead building with the future sustainability. That's one question. And the second will be I have heard about the lead-free radiology department because that is quite toxic, right? Any opinion on that, or how we're going to go to that area in the future?
I can answer both questions fairly easily. The lead, now in my experience, there were a couple of projects we have done. We were going for lead gold, and it was costing us 6% more in terms of costing than the building which was designed before. Now, when we look at the whole life costing, and we looked at the operations and maintenance costing because of the materials and the kind of lighting requirement and flexible layouts we had put in, which is the requirement in LEED Gold standards, the guidance we got from LEED. We were saving operational cost, and the return on investment for whatever 6% we were spending was about 3 years. So in 3 years, we were saving that money. Now, does that make sense? Many a times, lead platinum doesn't make sense because it is too expensive, or 7-8% cost is a longer return on investment. These are standard figures. I mean, they are standard figures in India and in Africa, but not in other parts of the world. These are the kind of discussions you need to have. Do you need that certification in terms of reputation? If not, take the guidance and do majority of things, not all of the things. For example, when LEED came to the Indian subcontinent, LEED is an American thing. It talks about that if you buy material within 500 kilometers of your site, you get a point. Now, when you put Nagpur in India at the middle, and do 500 kilometers. It's all of India. That particular point didn't make sense of lead for Indian subcontinent. It was something for a country which was wider, like America, and they were promoting that please buy locally. Don't go more than 500 kilometers and we'll give you a point. So someone needs to look at that in your building team, in the project management team, and say what of the lead guidance are viable and appropriate. You may not want to do all of them, but that's project by project, that's different. So that's answering your first question. The second thing is, I started my career as a site engineer on a cancer hospital where we were building. The building was for linear accelerators and cobalt therapies and cobalt therapy, and those buildings were where we were using concrete as a radiation shielding material instead of lead. Now, this was an old thing. It is not easy, but it was not as bad as lead. So we can go back to what we were doing before. If it is feasible, we have space. If it is allowed, we can do concrete as a radiation shielding material. And there are traditional radiation shielding materials possible as well. Stone walls, they do have, but the thicker requirements, it's a space problem, then you have to go for lead. And the building industry is definitely looking into that at the moment. There is no final answer to it yet.
I do have something to chip in for this lead-free department, and because I own a PET CT center, and procuring lead and concrete was a big issue for us. We do have a branch in the Tier 3 segment of India. And what people have started now doing in India, especially in Delhi, they have started putting up, they are using the brick walls and putting up barium layers. The barium, what we use for the oral contrast, the same barium, they are putting it in the plaster, even in paints. And when they went for the quality check assessment for any radiation leaks, it helped really well and almost equivalent. We are also using tiles in the walls. So tiles, what we use for the floor, the same tiles we use. So maybe Dr. Charbel can say something on that.
Yeah, absolutely. We've seen a lot of these very innovative approaches for construction, definitely. Also using air gap. So
Okay.
what we've seen in other centers, they've used, so between the brick wall, they've put a 20 centimeter air gap. And because most of the radiation, if you're looking at CT or interventional radiology or cardiology, is usually high scatter. And you're seeing that with the air gaps with those two walls. Very interesting as well. And another thing that's actually come recently that I've seen with one company, now they're using radiation shields on patients during interventional radiology with like 0.1% of lead. But instead of having thick layered lead like we normally have to block radiation from us or from the interventional radiologists and cardiologists, now they're spraying it into a bubble form. And the radiation is captured using a lot less lead required, and they put it on top of the patient in the path of the primary beam. So it's absorbing all that scatter, but the primary beam is going through. So it's quite interesting that, going into the physical construction, but also coming back to what we normally do every day, wearing these heavy lead gowns and shields everywhere and so forth. So yeah, that's all I'd like to add on that. But it's very interesting how materials are significantly being reduced, but having more impact.
Can I chip in from the radiation protection point?
Yes, Professor Ngo.
Yeah, I'm a physicist. The regulation says is 2 millimeter lead equivalent. So you could use 2 mm lead or its equivalent. So we have seen barium plaster. This is barium sulfate, been used for a long time. Unfortunately, the skill to put it on it is lacking today. most of the craftsmen, they are all retiring, but there is one of the best lead-free solution. Now, other thing is the cost. For example, we are all going for lead-free. We used to have lead apron, lead ground, but they are non-lead materials, but they are much more costly. So we are still not there yet where it is economical to switch on to the lead-free aprons or gowns or thyroid shoes and so on. But we are moving into direction. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
Just add on to that coming back to my slides, please, when you look at alternative materials, as Professor Kong already mentioned that you have to do whole life costing. Where are you procuring barium plaster from? If it is from far away, if it is not local, that's going to cost you a lot more, and that's going to consume energy in transportation. If you don't have skills available locally, that's not sustainable economically. Locally. So material availability, skills availability, and what Dr. Charbel talked about, the cavity walls. Cavity walls have been around for a very long time. Again, it went out of fashion because of skills availability. Cavity walls are very, very easy to do, that you are building two walls with a gap, that's fine. But there are always ties for earthquake consideration. And those ties will have air gaps or gaps where radiation can go through. So when you're building cavity walls, it's very, very important that then you can always do what Dr. Gaurang Rawal said, that you put tiles over it as a barrier for those air gaps wherever there are building ties. So consideration of all of that, if we work together, if you say that this is what is required, 2 mm lead equivalent, you will have to build 1.2 meter thick wall of concrete for that. Do you have space for it? And should we pour in so much concrete in there for that? So these are balances in terms of where the location is and all of that. So buildings that's why it's slightly complex in that sense.
Thank you.
I listen to all of you, and I'm just have some questions idea. Okay, how are we going to put everything in terms of the number, the carbon footprint in each battery report? Including, okay, right now we put radiation dose, how much the patient got, right, during the examination. That's easy. But then how are we going to, okay, how much carbon footprint that as a radiologist and you as a patient together create for this examination? That will be an interesting way of express our our concern in environment. But Dr. Du said that a lot of research need to be done, right?
Yes, absolutely. I think one of those challenges here is when we're taking a flight or we're doing something like has directly bad, right, into the environment with the emissions are very one-to-one, and we can kind of offset it. I think the challenge for us as physicians is really thinking about, well, the patient, like, is anything ever going to trump the patient's life, right, and the ability to diagnose that patient or treat them? And to my knowledge, I think everyone's going to say, obviously, we're going to do the best for the patient every time, right? And the thing is, and we can also help the planet, but is there any point where that's totally bad, right? If we do know that something builds up in the person's body, as Charbel had mentioned, then that might impact their health down the line, but that may not go into report per se. But we could measure things. We can consider things. What would we want to put in a report? I think that's a really great idea. And to kind of consider what kind of emissions should we be reporting, and maybe we should be reducing that. Is a departmental chair level thing that you would want to know if you wanted to build a new center? Maybe vendors should be putting that in their cost proposals, right? In how much emissions they're going to generate for building your center or installing your new MRI machine. I love those ideas. You should write all those papers, Shemari.
The other way around. Okay, how much we reduce gadolinium? And okay, congratulations. This is how much you reduce the carbon footprint for this examination. That might be a more
Yes.
positive way of thinking, because Charbel
Yes.
give me a very scare statistic. In the past, I remember we have the examination. We use double dose gadolinium, triple dose gadolinium as a vascular study, right? Vascular intervention. And right now, looking back, it's very scary how much you use those to make everything look better, but actually we forget the other part of the usage of the gadolinium.
I think what would be really good to see is quality improvement projects in radiology. So previously, I did two quality improvement projects between 140 and 120 kVp in CT, and we found that there was a significant reduction in cost of electricity used on the CT scanner. So maybe people could use that as a really great starting tool just to get people in that mindset, in that environment. And then with gadolinium, we also did the same thing by saying, okay, how many times did we reduce the volume relative to the standard volume, and what was our carbon footprint? And we used that as a quality improvement project to show the holistic approach. And naturally, in time, we saw lower KVPs in CT, which gives you better image quality anyway in patients less than 100 kilos. But then also we saw a natural decline in gadolinium usage and still getting great results in enhancement patterns. And so it can all start with us now. If we just start these little baby projects, maybe it takes 1 or 2 or 3 people, and then we can just start working backwards, just starting. I mean, to put it in a report would be amazing. But yeah, if we just start that could be a beautiful beginning of a new chapter of the world of radiology and sustainability.
Absolutely, I completely agree with you. And before we end our session, I would like to share these QR code with everybody who is attending, and it's our feedback form. I would really wish that all our delegates please scan this QR code and give your honest feedback, so how we can make this talk more and more interesting, and we can organize many of such green radiology and sustainable radiology topics in the future. Thank you so much. Before we sign out, I would really like to thank Dr. Chamari, Professor Ng, and especially Dr. Evelyn, who have helped us a lot in organizing such a wonderful session. I would also like to especially thank Dr. Charbel, Dr. Flo, and Nimitt Karia for giving their thoughtful views and helping us in the discussion session. I would like to thank Team Vidocto and AOSR for organizing such a wonderful conference. And before we just sign off, I would like to invite you all for the 2026 AOCR, which is happening in Singapore from 20th to 23rd of August. And the theme is Imaging Beyond Borders, Shaping a Sustainable Future. Would really like to meet you all in person. Thank you all and have a great weekend. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.